Hey, everybody, welcome to week 2 of Star Wars month. We're going to be talking about the Star Wars prequels. That's episode 1, 2, and 3, as well as Clone Wars and Bad Batch. We're going to be talking about some notable characters, some notable events from the prequels, and we're going to have a fun time, so let's get into it. Hello there. Welcome, everybody, to Geeks From The Multiverse podcast. I am one of your hosts, Matt. With me is John.
What's up, y'all? And today's episode, my friends, this is going to be an interesting one, because I know, when Matt and I were talking about the overview a little bit, episodes 1 and 2 and 3, like for me, it was like, growing up, and I know I watched those, of course, in theater, but like, for you were like, probably in college, probably,
I'm
high school, college. Yeah, man, I think we've described your age quite a few, just a little bit, but I'm just saying you were, you were alive, you were kicking it, you're a little bit older, but anyways, like the prequels though, I think in some ways, as Star Wars fans, you kind of, it's kind of like the bastard child a little bit, you know what I mean? It's kind of like you don't really talk about them as much because, and it's kind of stupid because like, I understand that people say, oh, 1, 2, and 3 kind of suck. And it's like, I think they get a bad rap for a lot of the bullshit when it comes to Star Wars as a whole. You know what I mean? Because like, it doesn't really do it any justice, regarding the whole, series. But like, I would say the first movie, it's like, yeah, you're getting introduced with some of the characters and whatnot, depending on, where you're at. But like, 2 and 3, like there's actual story. There's, progression, there's a lot more going on, but it's like you're getting more of the story, and you're getting the base of really how the next movies are going to play out down the road, but like, I don't think people really gave it a good, really good review on it. It just gets this bad rap overall, and it doesn't really do them any justice.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fan base for Star Wars when it comes to the prequels, I mean, now I think it might be a little bit different with, with Ahsoka and some of the content that's come out. I think Anakin and Vader has kind of grown on people a little bit more, I think. So I think the prequels kind of have a place in a lot more fans than they used to. But yeah, I mean, definitely the fan base has been split on, the prequels suck. The prequels aren't as good as the original, trilogy is. And I mean, nothing will be as great as the, original 4, 5, and 6. But
no, like I said, though, with the prequels as a whole, it's like, I think at the time, when you were watching all of them, it wasn't the same hype in a sense. You know what I mean? Because when you watch 4, 5, and 6, you're like, oh, wow, these are like amazing. They're like masterpieces. But like, now that they have more of a prominent like story on why everything is the way it was, I think people need to realize like, yeah, okay, like we talked about before with George Lucas saying like, 4, 5, and 6 was, why he did it the way he did at that time was because again, the technology wasn't, there to do the 1, 2, and 3 in the beginning, but like now when he did it, in the really the late, 90s, really early 2000s, it's like, he did it because like that was the prominent time to be able to do those movies, and I understand, like I said, it wasn't the same hype as before. I mean, a lot of people I know probably did go see these movies, of course, in the theaters, but like, when you saw 4, 5, and 6 for the first time, you were like, who the hell are these characters and where did they come from? Now you're kind of getting more the backstory behind some of the, the other characters like Obi-Wan and, and I mean, granted, you don't know who the hell Qui-Gon Jinn is and you don't know who Darth Maul is, but then you kind of learn more about, Palpatine, and how he comes a prominent role and some of the other side characters as well. Like, where does C-3PO come from, and R2-D2 and all these other things. Right. But you learn about that in the first, few films to understand where they go, down the road. And, you don't actually, now I'm thinking about it, you don't even meet Chewie at all. You don't really meet some of the core characters in 4, 5, and 6. really at all in 1, 2, and 3. But you see certain ones that that are there, and you're like, okay, well now this makes a lot more sense, and now this kind of makes the story for what it is.
Yeah. So, I mean, just to give kind of some dates, episode 1 came out in 99.
Right. So late
Episode
90s. Yep.
2 came out in 2002, and then episode 3 came out in 2005.
Yeah, and I remember, let's see. 99, 2000, you said 2002 and 2005?
Yeah.
Let's see. 99, I was 6. And then 2002, so I was 9. And then 2000, so I would say 2005. Yeah, I was actually overseas at the time when that came out. But watching even all of them at the same time, like going to the theaters and watching them, for the first time, it was like as a kid, you're kind of being introduced to, the Star Wars kind of universe in a sense. I mean, of course, I remember watching 4, 5, and 6 before, watching the prequels in a sense. But like, I think, watching it as a kid, you're kind of like, wow, this is kind of cool. Like you're getting, familiar with some of these people. You're of course in the first film, when Qui-Gon, I know we're kind of jumping here, but like, Qui-Gon dies, and it's like, what? Like he was an important character, and then all of a sudden he's like, okay, you're dead. That's it. And you're like, what? Like, where does this go, and why did this happen? But it makes sense because of Obi-Wan and how he becomes, the new really Qui-Gon in a sense down the road and so forth. But like, watching the prequels, literally looking at the Phantom Menace, it's like, you're really getting introduced to really the story behind Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, and being like, okay, well, we got to find this kid that Yoda's been talking about, because he's saying, well, there's one that is going to be, the most, powerful of them all. And of course, now they're looking for Anakin, and that's kind of like the whole story of like, okay, those two are literally looking for Anakin, and they're, of course they have little side adventures, and we get to meet some, interesting characters like, Jar Jar Binks, and, like you kind of get to see, like I said, you get to see, C-3PO and R2-D2 in a sense, and you get to see how they, they first came to be, because Anakin's like, oh, hey, look, I actually created these droids. I created them because, it was kind of like his friends in a sense. Granted, he came from a really, kind of shitty spot, and, it was Tatooine, right?
Yeah.
So like, and then you get to see how, a young Anakin in a sense, is like this podcast. Oh, that's the wrong answer. The, what is it?
Pod racing.
Pod racing. There you go. So you get to see him as a young kid, like, pod racing in this, and you're like, how is what looks like a 10-year-old able to drive this thing, especially at fast speeds? It's like basically NASCAR on steroids in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
It you know what I mean? Like, it's crazy to like look at that, and you're like, well, I wish at 10 years old I could be, riding in one of these things. You know what I mean? But I mean, what do you think about like at least the first episode? I know we're kind of, we'll talk about some of the notable characters, but like about like episode 1, what is like, some of the things that you think are kind of important, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, yeah. One of the things I wish there would have been more time with Qui-Gon, because I feel like his character was so kind of unique and iconic. Like, I would have liked to learn more about like who he was as a character, and I think like, why was he so defiant? Like with the council, why wasn't he on the council? Like, it was kind of like, why would he go through all this like stuff? And it was like, as a character, like he's so, he's a really cool character, and then to have him die so early was kind of really heartbreaking for the story.
Well, because wasn't he the one that basically didn't want? He was kind of skeptical about Anakin.
No,
or was it? No, was it?
Obi-Wan was skeptical.
Was it Obi-Wan?
Because Obi-Wan was still a Padawan in episode 1, and he was more like, why don't you just do what the council is telling you to do? And Qui-Gon was kind of one of those Jedi that was like, he's the chosen one. I'm going to train him anyway because
Yeah, that's right.
the Force brought us together for a reason.
Because okay, now I remember. So Yoda was saying like it's not. That's right. He was saying it wasn't a good idea originally to get him on board because he had a feeling about because he was so like he was potential for power for great things, but there could be an ultimate price down the road.
Yeah, there's that whole moment when Anakin's in front of the council and Yoda's like, how feel you? And Anakin goes, cold, sir. And one of the other, Jedi masters that's there, Kai Adimundi, you probably don't know who that is.
Not off the top of my head, no.
He mentions that he senses much fear in him, and I think Mace Windu then in turn, it's either Mace or Yoda that asks him, if he's afraid, and he says no, and he says, "What's that have to do with anything?" And it's kind of that like when you're watching it now, like I kind of have that like, oh shit, like you just made Yoda really mad, like because like he goes everything, and it's like because he goes into that whole like line of, fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering.
Right, and basically going in the ways of like the Sith.
Of the dark side, yeah. But it's a cool scene in that like they sense a lot of fear, and that's why they weren't going to train him, and they ultimately blame it on him being too old. Like he's too old. We're not going to allow you to train him, which Qui-Gon takes him as his Padawan anyways. And then once he dies, like he tells Obi-Wan, like make sure the boy gets trained, and ultimately they decide to allow Obi-Wan to train him. Which is kind of one of those notable moments. Another one in the first episode, obviously, is Palpatine becoming Chancellor of the Senate. Like that's kind of one of those notable moments when you first kind of meet Palpatine, knowing he's the same character that was the Emperor in 4, 5, and 6, but now he's just a senator.
Right, because technically, he had a great like ploy throughout the whole, all three of those films. Because like you said, if we ever could go back in time and see where he was at and how he became to be, and then all of a sudden he's like now he's on the Senate, like he's now a high-ranking official and so forth. Like basically it was like he's been around for many moons, and he's just been basically sitting there waiting for the right moment for the for the Republic, and be like, all right, well, now how can I create this system where basically the Sith is really in charge? And like, but we don't know that at the time, in a sense. But like, looking at it as like, Palpatine is just like, oh, he's just a frail, or like he's just a man. He looks all happy, he's all gun ho, and then all of a sudden you're like, you see him in like episode 2 and 3, and you're like, what the hell are you doing?
But the thing is, and it's funny because like we as watchers of the movie, we know that he's acting as Darth Sidious.
Right.
Like we know this as watchers. And Palpatine just as a villain, and I think I mentioned him when we did a villains episode. We did the villains episode. I mentioned him. As far as like the plan, obviously we know it didn't quite work out for him very well. But as far as his plans of how everything was going, he has like the ultimate plan. And from episode 1 to episode 2 to episode 3, everything just fell right exactly into place of how he played everybody. The Jedi, the Senate, Padme, like Anakin, everybody.
Not only that, when you look at it, like literally the series as a whole, if Palpatine was never really the main villain of the whole damn like series of movies, there'd be no Star Wars, or there wouldn't be anything to fight against. You know what I mean? Or that oppression, because that's literally what he was. The fact that he took years to plan. I mean, even in the last movie, in episode 9, it's like he planned for years.
Literally orchestrated everything. So, in episode 1, like it really just starts with the Trade Federation's blockade.
Right. Yep.
And you really think of that. Palpatine did that. It wasn't the Trade Federation. Palpatine hired the Trade Federation to do the blockade. So you have, Palpatine doing this. He created the blockade. He created the whole thing on Naboo so that the Queen would go to the Senate, fight for Naboo, and ultimately cast the no confidence in Chancellor Valorum, who was the Chancellor before him.
Okay.
And they voted for him to take over that role as Chancellor, which the Chancellor of the Senate is the one who's basically at the head of the Senate.
Right. I mean, looking at the, really the characters as a whole, it for at least episode 1, I mean, we got, Obi-Wan, you got Qui-Gon Jinn, you got Anakin, you got Mace Windu, Yoda, like all these high-ranking, basically Jedi in a sense. I mean, well, okay, Anakin and Obi-Wan are kind of, low man of the totem pole here, but like, the ones I mentioned, like Mace Windu, Yoda, I know you've mentioned a couple. I don't remember all of their names, and it's okay.
Ki-Adi-Mundi was, so he has like kind of a white goatee and a really long kind of cone-looking head.
Okay. I know who you're talking about.
Plo Koon was also in there.
Was he the one like it was like a pink and they had like a?
He has kind of
like a face mask, kind of like a Bane.
Yeah, kind of like a gas mask thing that he wears.
Yeah. There was also another. I think it was like a female version of Yoda.
I want to say Yaddle.
Yeah, it was like
Yaddle, I think is her name.
Same species as Yoda, but like was on the Jedi Council as well.
Same species, but like if she hit the ugly tree and hit every branch on the way down, kind of thing. Yeah, that was that was the female version.
You're not wrong. I mean, I know exactly what you're talking about.
I don't know if she was in episode 1 though, but I
thought she was.
Ultimately, she was in the council, and I don't know every name of the the masters that were on the council. I'm sure if you want to know, you can look them all up. There are some weird looking ones, but there are also some human ones too.
But like, them being the kind of like the core, foundation for really the Jedi in a sense. And then like, like again, you get introduced to R2-D2, you get introduced to C-3PO, when you see them in, 4, 5, and 6, you're like, oh, okay. But you don't know where they came from. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In a sense. But then now you're seeing it as like, okay, Anakin. Well, he created C-3PO. I don't know. Did he build R2-D2? Or did
R2-D2, I believe, was on one of the ships already.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. He was already one of the.
Oh, so he was kind of there.
Yeah, he was already there.
Okay.
But C-3PO was on Tatooine because Anakin was building him. And in episode 1, he didn't have an outer covering. He was all wires.
That's right. He wasn't all gold yet. He wasn't like what he is now, or it really wasn't for.
Yeah.
At that time.
Even in 2, he just had silver.
Yeah, because I want to say it was honestly, I think it was 4 when you really got to see the gold kind of effect to it. But like, you're looking at, like kind of like what we're mentioning here, but like Obi-Wan, again, being a Padawan, then going into, the Jedi Knight in like episode 2, and then, Anakin in episode 2 really is, now, an older version, of course, but like, he's the Padawan, and then, it's like they take turns. It's like, okay, you're the Padawan, I'm this. You're this, I'm that. Like so on and so forth. But it's like, basically Anakin was just really wouldn't even call him a Padawan. He'd be like a youngling or a
well, he's not a youngling because he wasn't a kid. So he was Obi-Wan Kenobi's Padawan, and Obi-Wan in episode 2 was promoted to Jedi Knight, and then after episode 2, he was promoted to Master at some point after episode 2.
Right, because in episode 3, he is already the Master. Like he's
already a Master in episode 3. And of course, in episode 3, Anakin becomes Darth Vader. So he never
Well,
gets to that. He never gets to the point of being a knight or a.
Well, no, I thought technically he was technically a knight.
No, well, I mean, maybe in Clone Wars, but I don't remember him ever getting to that point.
I think it was just a knight. I don't think he never became a master. I think because him being Darth Vader, in a sense, he became his own master. You know, and it's like that's how I would think. You know, if in the Sith world, like that's what it would. You know, he kind of just became his own master in a sense. I mean, because he was the only one that. I mean, I understand what the Sith powers like. You know, Sidious. He had a lot. Like he had probably one of the most powerful ones, but like Darth Vader, in a sense, had like probably one of the most powerful force. Like, I mean, the fact that the dude didn't even have to really. I mean, could he use literally his mind in a sense instead of choking, or did he? I feel like no.
I mean, he always uses his hand.
He always uses. I feel like he could literally just use his mind, and he could like choke you from the other side of the room, and be like, no problem.
He probably could,
but you know what I mean. Like it was just that way he was doing it. But you know, looking at some of the interesting ones. So I know I'm just gonna go down just a slight. Oh, maybe not.
I mean, we do have Jango Fett. He was in the second episode. He was a bounty hunter.
Okay, no, that's what I was. No, I was trying to find him, but I couldn't see him. Jar Jar Binks. Okay, so I'm not gonna lie. Okay, when you first meet him, probably, and this is where I think a lot of people give the movies, well, at least the prequels wise, give them a lot of shit for. It's like you get this clumsy dude who doesn't know how to freaking walk. He literally walks over his ears all the time. He's the clumsy, like he literally starts a war on his own planet because all of a sudden he's like, oh, and he just starts throwing stuff, and it's like it's bombs basically, but it just like blows up the whole battlefield, and you're just like, if this clumsy motherfucker didn't do half the shit that he did, he probably wouldn't have been as bad as he would have been. But the interesting theory though, is I did hear about this, is that there is a theory, which I don't know if you knew about, that he was basically was a Sith Lord from the beginning.
Well, I mean, I don't know if he was a Sith Lord, but I mean, I think when you look at Jar Jar Binks, and I know like by far he is one of the worst Star Wars characters created, and I do kind of agree with this fact, but if you take into context, okay, you have a Gungan, species like Jar Jar Binks, who was outcast from his own underwater city.
Yep.
Because of how clumsy he was. And if he returned, he would be in jail.
Which pretty much what he was.
And somehow, he ends up in the right place at the right time, right in front of Qui-Gon. Like, this kind of nomadic idiot ends up right where a Jedi is and gets saved by him. Not only gets saved by him, but they go back to his city and they get transportation and they clear him from they actually clear him of being there.
Yeah.
And the clumsiness in the battle that you're talking about.
Yep.
There's particular scenes where, like in one of the scenes that I can think of, he gets his foot caught in a wire of a droid.
See, that's what I was thinking of.
He gets his foot caught in the wires of a droid. And in trying to like kick the droid off of his foot, this droid now is shooting other droids. It's like weird Inspector Gadget luck.
Well, so
you know what I mean? Yeah. If you ever watch Inspector Gadget, like he's so stupid that he never gets hurt and everything just goes right.
No, well, that's what I mean with like Jar Jar. It's like, it's like he started all this random shit that all of a sudden, like it protected him. He became sort of a hero in some ways, but like it almost like he started it too at the same time. But like the reason why it's interesting is like even some of the things that like his clumsiness and his like stupidity on like, oh, I have this the wiring of the droids attached to me, it's like shooting all the other droids or whatever. Like I remember, what was it, like he like falls almost to his death, but like he somehow lands and he's perfectly fine, or something like that. And it's like, how are you like this clumsy and still somehow being able to do all this stuff? I don't understand.
So you take the fact that he's like this outcast from Naboo, he can't go back home, and somehow now he is a Senate representative on the arguably probably the richest planet with the most people living on it, Coruscant.
Right. And that's what I'm saying about this whole theory behind him being Sith, because, or at least having some connection with Sidious. But you can't, of course, unfortunately, it's all a theory. It's not really proven, but like that was one of the things that people were like, oh, well, he must be a Sith, and that he's actually, his clumsiness it's kind of like the drunken like style of like martial arts. Like that's his way of doing it within the, the Sith and really the Jedi kind of order. But like,
I think the suggestion was more of like he is like force sensitive, and he was drawn to Palpatine. I mean, obviously at the time, like nobody knew that Palpatine was Darth Sidious.
Right. No, and that's what I mean. It's
so like, it's really that question, like, could he be like a Sith Lord or like a dark side, Force user, or could have Palpatine been manipulating Jar Jar to the point? Because I mean, in episode 2 is when we actually see Jar Jar vote Palpatine. Like he's the one that's responsible for giving like Chancellor Palpatine emergency powers to use the clone army.
Well, and that brings up what you said earlier about Jango Fett. So, and this is where I can, say that a little bit too, is that, yes, Jango was the original, basically, idea for the clone army. And that's why you have the Clone Wars. So, like, so basically, Jango is, the ultimate, clone in a sense. And so, of course, all the clone troopers that you see in the movie is literally him. It's all whatever. And I can't remember, what is that city that they're all coming from?
Camino.
And so again, so just if you haven't seen Star Wars, again, you get on it, man. So Jango is Boba's father. So basically, when you look at Boba in 4, 5, and 6.
I mean,
well, hold on. So technically, that is the case. Jango is Boba's father.
Technically, by words, he's his father, but technically, Boba is him.
Okay, as a clone, whatever. But the point is, we'll just say he's his father, whatever. So my point is like when you look at, in the movie, right? So you see little Boba. Yes, Boba in that movie was technically Boba in, 4, 5, and 6. Basically, is the same person in a sense. But like, if you look at Jango versus Boba, yes, Boba was more the famous, Mandalorian in a sense, bounty hunter, and so he was kind of like the more, renowned throughout the the universe, I guess, if you want to say.
Yeah.
They didn't talk about the Mandalorians as much, but again, that's why you have the TV show, kind of get a more of a knowledge base on it. But when you look at the one thing I actually did find interesting was, so with Palpatine, right? I'm kind of going around here, but like he always had to have one person as his protege. Every single movie.
Well, that was the rule with the Sith. And I'm not sure if after sometime before episode 1, when the Sith were eliminated, there was always a Sith Lord and there was always an apprentice. There was always 2.
So like, I understand that, let's say in general, right? So I would say he would have had 4. So like in the first 3 films, right? So he would have had Darth Maul, which of course he died.
Mm-hmm.
Then Dooku would have been the second, right? I could also throw in Grievous.
Oh, Grievous wasn't, he wasn't an apprentice to...
No, but I mean, he did follow, like he did, didn't he not say like,
He He wasn't a Jedi. He wasn't a Jedi or a Sith, though. He just killed. He killed Jedi and stole their lightsabers.
Well, okay.
So
Well,
he wasn't a Force user, and he wasn't an official
member,
like
right.
an apprentice of Darth Sidious.
I mean, then, so I mean, I understand he was basically a droid in a sense, but basically, he had to be an alien of some sort. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it was kind of weird. It was like he was like basically bionic.
Pretty much.
Sense,
I mean,
yeah. Like, I don't know how to describe it because he looked like he was a being of some sort, but like wasn't a full on robot. You know what I mean? So like, that's the weird part. But like, yeah, I know. I mean, okay, so fine. So Maul, Count Dooku, and yes, and then of course Vader at the end of episode 3 that you get to see. But like, I always found that interesting. That's like even with Dooku. I mean, Dooku. I don't know. Like, if we're basing it off like who's the worst out of them all, like I mean, Darth Maul had a potential. Like, if he wasn't killed technically in the movie, I feel like he would have had probably a very destructive path. Like if you would have allowed him to grow into that role, you know what I mean? Because I think that if Maul was around, I don't even think Darth Vader would have been a thing.
I mean, he might not have been, but I think, I mean, being Palpatine being who he is, I mean, Darth Sidious being who he is. I mean, obviously, he has the gift of foresight because he can foresee future events. So, I mean, obviously, he must have known that Darth Maul was going to fall at the hands of Obi-Wan.
I mean, I get that, but like, I mean, granted, we find out again with the animated shows and stuff, like that's not the case. Right. But I'm just saying that when you're looking at the movies, just without even the TV shows, I'm looking at it as if Maul was given the opportunity, and let's say he never actually had a foresight for anything, I think Maul would have had more destructive powers, or at least a destructive path. Like he just, granted, you only see him in literally one scene. It's the one damn scene. That's it. Like, you don't see him anywhere else. It's only that fight scene.
No, you see him several times in that.
Oh, okay.
That movie.
Okay, here and there. But what I'm saying is, you don't really get to see him until really the end, in a sense. Like you see him a little bit, but it's not like a full on fight that Qui-Gon and him.
No, I mean he does fight Qui-Gon in the desert, but
no. Okay, I understand what you're saying, but I'm saying like you don't really get to. I get what you're saying. You do get to see him in a sense, but like you don't really get to see him.
No, I do know what you're saying. Okay. Like we did not see him enough in that movie, and I know what you're saying. But that's where I think Palpatine like only used Maul as a pawn. Like he basically used him as a chess piece.
No, I get it now looking at it like that. Yeah. But I'm just saying, looking at it as a whole, I think he would have been more destructive than Vader if he was given the opportunity. And like I said, Vader, I mean, I've heard a theory that, if Anakin was light, or had basically just light, how could he have turned, let's say, certain events, like, he could have raised Luke and Leia to be Force users and like could have created a whole nother thing. Could have been a whole nother timeline. You know what I mean? Like, and I mean, granted, I know a little different here, but I'm just saying, you always got to think of the possibilities. I mean, we are geeks from the multiverse, man. Got to think those different possibilities here, but you kind of moving forward, it's like, looking at all the characters like Padme, I mean, of course was important because she was the mother of Luke and Leia. Right. So like you had to know, like, she was the queen of Naboo. Right. And then you had Senator. And then again, she was the mother. So she was important. Of course she was important because she literally created two beings that were going to be very important in very future movies, and, yeah, I mean, pretty much, looking at all the characters, let's go into some events. Granted, we've talked about a lot of these events, I feel.
Well, I first did want to talk about the certain timing of the prequel movies, because I do think that that's important if people don't know already.
What do you mean timing?
So between episode 1 and 2, there is.
Oh, I see.
There are 10 years of difference between the two movies.
Well, you kind of have to. It's progression, because like 1 and 2, 1 really is like, him again, really Vader or really Anakin being a kid. But the only weird part of that is that there should have been like a little bit more time, because like you see him, let's say as a 10-year-old, and then what he's supposed to be like a 16-year-old maybe. You know what I'm saying? Like, but in the movie, it's like you look at him and you're like, does he? You know, it seems weird, like how the
So yeah, I
progression
mean,
changes. But
officially it's set 10 years after Episode 1. Clone Wars, which comes after Episode 2, that one is set like days or at least a month after Episode 2. And then
my bad. No, okay. I thought you meant so like episode 2. I thought it was
between 1 and 2 is 10 years.
okay. Well, okay, never mind. Then that makes more sense, because if it was just like a it's 3 years apart, I'm like, yeah, that's a big difference.
No,
but yeah,
between 1 and 2 is 10 years.
all right, that makes more sense.
Clone Wars is like days or at least a month after Episode 2, and it occurs over a 3-year period.
Okay, and then set 3 years after episode
And then
2.
yes, so Episode 3 is set 3 years after Episode 2, and then Bad Batch takes place after Episode 3 and deals with events that occur in Episode 3, such as Order 66.
Which that would make sense. And if you don't know what Order 66 is, well, you need to start watching Star Wars. But basically, it was Palpatine saying, "Kill all Jedi," and that was it.
Yeah, that was a particular programming that was in the clones, so that when he issued the order, they were programmed to basically kill the Jedi.
Oh yeah, including the younglings. That was a sad moment. Anakin, why'd you do it? Why? Anyways,
so in Episode 2, like this is, and I know you don't know who Sifo Dyas is, John.
Yes, Sifo Dyas. You know what, Matt? Please explain, because I have zero knowledge of who the hell Sifo Dyas is.
So when Obi-Wan does go, he learns of the bounty hunter Jango Fett, and this is from the second attack on Padme. He goes, he finds Kamino, and when he goes there, he learns that they're making a clone army for Sifo Dyas. Sifo Dyas was a Jedi Master. He was on the council, and he did have a gift of foresight, and he actually foresaw the Clone Wars. And when he went to the council / Senate, well, he wanted to go to the Senate to basically create an army to deal with the Clone Wars. They ultimately kicked him off the council. And knowing the threat was still imminent, he still commissioned the clone army in the name of the Jedi and the Senate. So he went to Kamino, still commissioned them to make a clone army, even though he didn't really have that permission to do that.
So, if I'm not mistaken, Sifo, was that the tall white alien looking person?
No, he wasn't seen in the movies.
Oh, it wasn't. Okay, because
no, he had died like 10 years prior to the movie starting.
Okay, no. The real reason why I was asking is because I think it was on Camino. It was that weird looking. I don't even know. It was like a tall looking alien. White. I don't know. I can't remember exactly. I thought it might have been a female. I don't know, or portrayed as whatever. I didn't know if that was it, but I clearly was wrong. But I think it's interesting that with them saying no, sorry, you're not gonna, you're not gonna do this, because even though you saw something, it doesn't mean it's gonna happen. Blah blah blah, or whatever.
That was URL Poof you're talking about.
I'm sorry, URL Poof, that tall white alien looking.
Yeah, with the really long neck.
The really long neck.
Yeah.
Okay. So
yeah, I think it was basically because he was asking for the creation of this army, and they did not see the threat. And I think basically his insistence on this is a threat, they just probably were like, you're kind of crazy, kind of thing. I think you're kind of crazy. This is not what we want to do. We're, Jedi are meant for peace, not for war. And that's, I think, probably why they ultimately kicked him off the council. And he had still commissioned the clone army. And at some point, Darth Sidious and Count Dooku had learned of the clone army creation. and had him killed so that the clone army would remain a secret until the timing was just right.
And see, that's how Palpatine knew exactly what to do in all these moments.
So obviously he knew about Jango Fett. He knew that obviously he was the one that the DNA was given to the Caminos to make the clone army, which is probably why he sent Jango Fett in the first place to make those attempts, knowing that they would investigate, they would find Camino, and then that's kind of where that the clone army got found.
So it's like a trap, but basically saying, hey, guess what? Here we are. But we know that, we already knew all along, but we wanted to make sure you guys knew so that way you thought you found them first. So forth. I mean, like I said, that's why I said Palpatine, he was.
And ultimately, like the Jedi do use the clones.
But
in episode 2, and then like at the end of episode 2, you see, the Star Destroyers flying off. You see all the clone troopers like lining up, and you see kind of Palpatine and the Senate.
So what
like overlooking them.
Right. I think what I find interesting is that maybe I didn't know this, but like, how does the because if you think about how Order 66 happened, right, in like kind of that realm, like you kind of see, the clone troopers, of course, be there for a little bit, but that's like, when do they? Because like not all stormtroopers clearly are, Jango's clone. You know what I'm saying? Like, so like I was wondering how that starts to differentiate at some point because like clone troopers aren't really a thing after like episode 3. I understand there's like a miss, whatever. Like, do they all get basically killed off and they're like, we're going to start the stormtroopers and, start making the death troopers and all this other crap, down the road. But like how does that really transition?
I don't know where the change happens, but I mean, as far as like 1, 2, and as far as Order 66, all the clone troopers are the same.
No, I know that, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like, cause like with the Empire and whatnot down the road, I just found it interesting that, we don't talk about how the clone troopers really just in a sense die off and they, then they basically kind of turn, really transition into the stormtroopers in a sense. Because that's kind of like how the foundation of, in a sense, the stormtroopers came to be, in a sense, because of the clone troopers and so forth. So it just, to me, it just doesn't make any sense on how it just disappeared all of a sudden.
Well, I mean, if you take kind of Finn's story, I mean, it sounded like Finn was more kidnapped.
Well, right,
in
with the
a sense,
stormtrooper
as a child, and then brought into the Empire to be a stormtrooper. So,
Right.
I mean, that's probably more of how that occurred.
Well, probably because they didn't have clones. Well, they didn't have maybe, I don't know. I mean, they can't say they didn't have technology because they could have easily stolen it, but I don't know. That's just something I always thought of. I just didn't understand. But, looking at, kind of like what we talked about is like, without Jar Jar being in, like you said, the right time, right place, everything else, the fact that he was the one that was like, hey, so Palpatine, we're going to make you the Chancellor, basically. And I hope you're ready for the responsibility. He's like, okay, yeah, cool, whatever. And he's basically Chancellor. And he's like the main person in the whole freaking Senate. And you're like,
well,
he's
the
basically
thing
the
is,
most powerful person.
I mean, the thing is with episode 2, Padme is on the Senate for Naboo.
Right. But
so
like,
Jar Jar is the representative in place
her.
of her when she's not there.
right.
So at the time, Obi-Wan is, kind of being held prisoner, with Count Dooku because Dooku's holding him prisoner.
Right. On Geonosis. Yes.
On Geonosis.
Was it Geonosis or Genosis?
Geonosis.
Oh.
Yeah.
Never mind.
And, after Anakin and Padme kind of do their thing on Tatooine, they go to rescue Obi-Wan and get, imprison themselves.
Right. And that's when you see it was like the arena fight.
Right.
When they all verse like a different monster of some sort. But yeah.
So it's kind of when, in the Senate room back on Coruscant, and they're all like, if we only had someone who could authorize emergency powers. If we only had an army, and Jar Jar's over here like, I know one. It's like he's the only one that can really give that emergency power because he's the only one that knows the information. You know what I mean?
No,
So
I know, but it's
he's just in that like exact point of power. And again, you ask that question like, how does a stupid ass outcast like Jar Jar Binks from a sideways planet like Naboo end up on Coruscant, probably with the most power in that moment?
like I said, man, I just don't understand how Jar Jar has been so lucky up until this point, literally to be. He's been treated like gold, and then on top of that, he's already like, okay, you know what? I'm going to make a really important decision on behalf of Padme, and it's like, I would hope that maybe Padme would have been like, you know what? If like she was there, like probably be like, shut up, just don't say a word, kind of a deal. But like he's like, I'll just say it. It's not a big deal. But he doesn't know the consequences
Yeah, I mean,
of his
ultimately,
actions.
the clone army does help to save them,
But
but
in the end,
in the end, giving Palpatine that emergency power also authorizes the use of the clone army for the Republic, which
right,
gives the Republic
the ultimate power,
basically their own military.
right, without even have to doing anything either.
Yeah,
And that was the issue. And so, like again, with him programming that Order 66 in a sense, he already knew like he could have that in place, and there would be
and
no
that's
issues.
where we have the Clone Wars, and that's where the whole animated show kind of takes over what happens between 2 and 3. And I get it; it's an animated show, it's a kids show. But if you haven't watched Clone Wars, you just need to watch the dang show because it is canon and it is really good actually. It does have a lot of good information.
Well, it's also where you get to meet Ahsoka.
And you get to see Darth Maul many, many times.
That's true, as different versions.
Very angry with spider legs.
Yes, but it's funny because like you don't. The one thing that I never understood then is like, with the animated show, with seeing Ahsoka and whatnot. I really wish, in some ways, they would have just brought her in episode 3. You know what I'm saying? I really wish that would have happened, and because it doesn't like I understand with it being canon
Well,
now
the,
and
the
stuff.
Clone Wars wasn't made until after the movies were made, though. So
I
I
know
mean,
that's the problem.
she really wasn't a creation until after the.
No, I know, but like when you're looking at episode 3 and you're like, okay, who the fuck is Ahsoka? You know what I'm saying? Like, all of a sudden now you're like, oh, well, that's Ahsoka because you see her in the animated show, and then you now see her in the new show, and then you're like, you get to see him, basically, or you see her talking to Anakin, So, like, in a sense, I understand it happened afterwards, but it's like, that's something I really wish, like, that was the problem. Was like Lucas probably was like, probably not going to do something with, let's say, Ahsoka. Like, was she originally a part of the books and things of that nature? I don't know. I haven't
I
read
want
all
to
the
say that
books.
was a Dave Filoni special.
See, and that's what I'm wondering because if that was the case, it sucks for the opportunity. You know what I'm saying? Because if the movies were already, I understand the movies were already made. It is what it is. It's just, I think the transition wise, it just, you're just missing out on really Ahsoka in that sense.
Yeah, but I mean, you're not going to go adding Ahsoka into a movie that's already been out for 3 years.
No. I understand that. But like I said, if Dave Filoni was to do it, then I understand that it is what it is now. But I'm just saying, if it was originally part of his original storyline,
I don't think it was.
well, then that's a thing. But then I know it is what it is. But like, looking, yeah. So okay, so Anakin, in his ultimate wisdom, down the road, was like, you know what, maybe you should marry, Padme, just because, and that's a great idea, right? Because he gets all angry, it's like I love her, blah blah blah. I'm like, you might want to rethink that there, pal, because
I can say this. I mean, when you're watching the movies, and I think only recently, since I've seen, Anakin and Ahsoka and a few other things, Kenobi as well. You watch Anakin, Hayden Christensen in particular. He's really whiny, and I can see where Luke gets it.
Oh, I definitely could see it.
You know what I mean? Because like you see him on Tatooine, like when he's talking to Padme. You see it on Naboo when he's talking to Padme, and he's talking about Obi-Wan, and he's like, he's overly critical. He's blah blah blah, and it's like, stop whining and shut up.
No, it kind of reminds me. Hold on, ready? It kind of reminds me of when Luke was like, "Uncle Owen,"
Yeah.
it's like a whiny little high pitched voice there, and you're just like,
This droid has a bad motivator. Uncle Owen,
"Uncle Owen."
where do we get that droid? How about that droid over there?
It's like, shut up, kid. No, and I get it. It's crazy that when you look at Anakin and you look at Luke and you don't notice it right now. Of course, like when you're watching it, maybe you're like, oh, okay, that's cool, whatever. But then now you're watching it so many years later,
Yeah.
and you're like, man, why are you a whiny little bitch? Like, just shut the hell up and get to it,
He's
bud.
overly critical. He's holding me back.
I'm like, just shut up, man. Like, look, man, we have an episode called Male Loneliness. I think you need to watch it, my friend. Like, you need to get on that board. But no,
Well, and that was really like, the prequels were, I mean, like we said in the last episode, the episode 1, 2, and 3 is really the tragedy of Darth Vader. And it's really like, you see Anakin as a young kid, and he, yes, he is a slave on Tatooine. He gets a little bit of hope with being freed and training as a Jedi. But then I think, that hope becomes like the need for power and the need to save people. And it really turns once his mother dies. And obviously, like you can see that when he takes that first step onto the dark side is when he slaughters that whole tribe of sand people.
oh no, I full heartedly.
You know what I mean? Like not, and he's explaining it to her, like when he's in that garage, at the
I think, yeah, I know what you're talking
at
about.
Lars,
Yeah,
yeah, farm or whatever that is.
I think that the thing too on that is like, it's pretty sad that you see him do all that, and then on top of that, it's like he, when he was like getting more and more angrier, and you see it like when he starts to change his eye color a little bit, and then Padme looks at him and says, "I don't be near you," and then like full on, he just says, "Come here." It's like I was like an abusive moment. I'm like, I was like, if I saw that, I'd be like, "Come here, bitch." I was like, "I'll punch you right in your face." But no, but like he became this like a legit asshole, because I understand, like, of course I understand, losing your mother. Absolutely. I get it. To kill a whole friggin' tribe of them and then basically turn around and start abusing the shit out of your wife, basically, who's about to have your kids at some point. Really, man? Like, calm down. Like, okay,
Yeah.
like I understand with the whole force sensitivity, but like this dude, he was going on a basically a war path because, like you said, Obi-Wan, he doesn't like me because, I'm just a little whiny ass little bitch and I can't, take fucking criticism. Like the way I look at it is just like, dude, grow up. Okay. Like, but he's just like, nobody likes me. And it's like, bro, I was like, you got a lot to learn, my friend. Like you need to like get some counseling or something.
Yeah,
But like,
I mean, the whole thing was attachment, and that's like with his mother. He would have those dreams of her suffering, and then once him and Padme were kind of falling in love and date, using the quotes here, but dating, he would see the visions of her in childbirth, struggling and dying, and that's kind of where that draw to the dark side was really like he wanted enough power to protect people that he loved from dying, and then he loses his mother, so now he's like a failure, and ultimately, like, who does he blame? He blames Obi-Wan because Obi-Wan must be holding him back from becoming as powerful as he can be.
Yeah.
And when he tries to fight Dooku towards the end of episode 2, he kind of learns the hard way that he's not as, you know, he's not as great of a fighter as Dooku might be, and he ends up
Oh,
losing. He ends
yeah.
up losing his right arm, and that's, at the end of the movie. Obviously, they get married.
Now, I know we're gonna be talking about episode 3 here in a second, but like because I'll jump into the kind of what I just mentioned a little bit was like Luke and Leia. Does he? Because I can't remember. Did he know that he had
No,
kids? No, that's right. He didn't know that he had kids at the time. Or no,
No,
no. He knew. Actually, no. He knew that she was pregnant, but she didn't know.
he knew she was pregnant, but
Didn't know what
what
happened to the kids.
Palpatine, because they basically, when he had started force choking her and she collapsed,
Right. This is. I know. Yeah.
and then that's when their fight started on Mustafar.
Yes. Yep.
And then as they were fighting, obviously we know who wins. If you don't know, then go watch the damn movie already.
But now you know.
When Obi-Wan wins, he leaves them there and basically takes her, to, I don't know what the ship is, but
yeah, I know what you're talking about. But yeah,
she gives birth and they decide to split
right. Both Luke and
the
Leia.
kids up. So when Palpatine gets to Mustafar, that's when we kind of see, and that this part of the movie is really, really cool because like I really dig this part when they're putting the suit on him.
Oh, yeah,
and they're putting like the the cybernetic legs on him, and like the helmet goes on, and you first hear that. You first hear that noise, and it's like it sends like the tingles up your
Then you're like,
arms,
"Ooh."
and you're like, oh man, yeah.
You're like, that's right.
But then like it's also the weirdest moment because like you hear the voice, and he's asking about Padme. What is she still alive? And Palpatine is basically like, no, it seems that you've killed her.
Right, because then he lost.
And then you have that weird no, and everything's like crushing in the room, like.
Yeah,
But it's just the weirdest, like, no. It's so weird.
So I mean, because I know, okay, because he thought he killed his kids. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, because he thought he killed Padme when he force choked her, so he thought that he had killed her with the kids.
Right, but it's interesting though because like of course Luke goes to live with Uncle Owen, and and all that, and then you have basically General Organa, who is part of
Bail Organa.
Yeah, what was he? He was part of the Senate, right?
Or he was part of the Senate for Alderaan.
Okay, yeah, because then again, and then of course in lovely episode 4, that's what happens. The planet that she lived on, boom, just gets blown up. But anyways, that's a different story. But we'll talk about that next week. But yes, General Grievous, man, I tell you, like I said, he's an interesting character, but like, I guess the question is, do you think it would have mattered if he was in the story or not? Like for real, like for plot purposes wise.
Well, yeah, I mean, because like I said before, Palpatine basically uses, I think, basically everybody as chess pieces. So he just was another chess piece. I mean, he didn't really kidnap Palpatine. Like that was part of the ploy to get Obi-Wan and Anakin to rescue him, knowing that they were going to fight Count Dooku. But the whole thing was that the fight was meant for Anakin to win the fight so that he could convince Anakin to kill Dooku.
Right.
Which ultimately does occur.
Right. And that's kind of his like final straw, as in like how he then becomes even more, Vader-like in a sense. And that's how him and Obi-Wan were like, okay, fine. You want to go around or two? Okay, that's fine. Let's go. And then they started to split up and do all that fun stuff. But like,
Yeah, I know. I mean, it really was him killing Dooku instead of taking him, as a prisoner back to the Jedi Council to face, trial.
Yeah, because you're saying, but in Obi-Wan's sake, he's like, you're not the judge and executioner in this case.
Right.
You should be allowing the council to determine the fate of, this, individual and whatnot. He's like, no. I was like, I wanted to kill him, but blah, blah, blah. You're holding me back. And it's like, okay, well, actually, I wasn't. I was trying to save you from, well, hopefully your demise, but here we are, and this is what happens. And like that's where that, it's like it almost like you see, because I remember in that movie, it's like you kind of see it's like the brotherly love, and then it's like, why'd you do it to me? Like, why did you feel the need to like betray my trust, and like betray what I'm trying to teach you in a sense? And it's like you see that power struggle with
Yeah.
both of them, and it's like,
Well, it's really, you get to the point where, Palpatine does actually appoint Anakin to the Jedi Council, which he doesn't really have any authority to do so.
right.
And they actually do allow it, but they don't grant him the rank of master, which then he turns around and is like, wait, how can I be on the council and not be a master? And they go, why don't you just sit down and shut up?
Pretty much, you're a kid and shut up.
Basically. And, they ask Obi-Wan to tell him, like, the council wants you to keep an eye on Palpatine. And that's kind of where he first gets that, like, maybe the Jedi are the actual enemies here and not the protectors like I thought they were.
Right. And that's where
Everything shifts at that point, and Palpatine reveals that he was trained in the dark side.
well, and that's the thing, and that's why, of course, you see Mace Windu, bye, he gets thrown out the window basically, but like,
Yeah.
eh,
And another weird scene in that movie where you have Sidious now, where he's Sidious, and the face is changing because the Force lightning, and Mace is telling him, like, just give up, like, we have you. And that, it's just these weird, like, dialogue scenes where Palpatine's like there with the Force lightning, and he's like, no, no. You just,
no.
he's just repeating it over and over again, and it's like, it's so weird. But
But didn't he say at one point he was like that power? Like, didn't he like randomly say that too? Like in the
well,
like,
that's
while he was doing
when,
it?
I mean, that's when Anakin, because Mace Windu initially told Anakin, just stay here, we'll confront him, and
We'll take care of it, basically.
like, we'll take care of it when we come back. Like, if what you tell us is true, like, you will be given the rank of master. Like, we will trust you.
Oh, that's right. No, it wasn't. It wasn't Sidious that did it. It was Anakin that pushed him.
So Anakin actually goes and cuts his Mace Windu's hand off,
Right, but then
and then
pushes him in a sense.
that's when Palpatine's like, ultimate power.
Yeah, that was what it was. Yeah.
Basically blasts him out the window.
See, I wasn't like totally off. I was just trying
Yeah.
to remember who did what, but like, yeah, no, because that's why I was like, ultimate power.
And then, of
it is
course,
like,
becomes Darth Vader, and then he goes to the Jedi Temple and kills all the Jedi, including the younglings.
yeah, that's why I said it's one of the saddest
We
moments.
got Order 66.
I mean,
Which is one of, I mean, it's one of those, like, you have like that whole scene in that whole part of that movie where it's like you're just watching it, and you have like, I think you have grown with such a connection with the Jedi from episode 1, episode 2, and now you have like Palpatine, who is 100% Darth Sidious now. You have Anakin, who is 100% Darth Vader right now, killing everything that's at the Jedi Temple. And you have all these like clone troopers now. They're killing the Jedi, scene after scene. And, finally, that's when we have the scene where he goes to Mustafar. He kills the Trade Federation people, the separatists.
oh, yep.
There, and then we have that scene where him and Obi-Wan fight, which is really epic. Like, that's probably one of the best lightsaber fights.
I mean, yeah, I would say my other favorite was honestly in episode 2 was really when they were reversing like the creatures in a sense. Like, I mean, granted, not the lightsaber, but just the sole fact that they're like, they're chained up and they're like, well, how the hell am I going to beat, this beast, or how am I going to, tame it in a sense? And they find a way to do it, and then they use them. And then basically the ultimate fight was in that arena when it was the clone troopers, I think it was the Genosians, and like Geonosians, like, and then it's like all the lightsabers are flying around and all the
Mace Windu going full Samuel L. Jackson on Jango Fett's head.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like it's like one of the ultimate battles, and then you see Boba like,
that right there was pure Battlefront right there.
It was literally.
That's what I thought when I was watching. I was like, man, this is like such Battlefront right here. Like, it's like when you go into a match on Battlefront and there's like 62 people in the match and they're all firing at the same time.
No, you're right. I mean, and it's crazy. I mean, like that's what I said in the original Battlefront. Like you were doing all of those kinds of different scenes and different battles, and it's like you were living the story of like if you were basically playing it in the game or like really in the movies. And so like that's why I was like, oh, this is great. But I think with the episodes though, I think the really what I think it makes a lot of people upset is that when you're looking at the progression of the stories and everything else of how the prequels have done, kind of going back to the beginning of what I said originally about fans, liking it, not liking it, so on and so forth, kind of what we were talking about. It just seems like, that's still underrated value that it now really, I think people should really like, what I'm probably going to end up doing is probably rewatching it again because it's been so long because like you kind of just like, you see it and you're like, I'll watch it again, maybe like 10 years from now or something like that, but like, you'll watch 4, 5, and 6, like it's no problem. You'll be like, hey, I watch it every Christmas, it's like a tradition, you know what I mean? So I feel like now, now that we have all these, these movies, these TV shows, things that kind of correlate with one another, it's like, really give it a chance, because like I think, with people not allowing unfortunately it wasn't the growth that it should have gotten, you know what I mean? Or really that popularity in a sense, because like I said, I understand 4, 5, and 6 were the ultimate, like, that's the trilogy, that's the saga. But like, it should have never been like that. You should have been able to give, the first 3 movies a really good chance because I can tell you they're probably a lot better than trying to watch 7, 8, 9 in some ways.
Yeah.
I'm not saying always.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, the prequels were really like the tragedy of Darth Vader. It's really like the fall of Anakin and the rise of Vader, however you want to think of it. And, I've always loved the trilogy. I don't care what anybody else really says, but I mean, when you're really looking at them all, they're canon. I mean, what are you going to do?
Well, right.
The story is canon. Whether you like them or not like them, the stories that are inside each of the 3 movies, plus, Bad Batch, plus Clone Wars, it's all canon. So you can stick with your 4, 5, and 6, but you're missing everything that happened before that.
Well, and like I said, like if you're like I said before, like if they decided to do like a prequel to the prequel, and like really go over the whole, Knights of the Old Republic and, start looking at like the Sith and the Jedi for what they were at the time, you're missing out on a crucial, history in a sense.
Yeah.
So you can say whatever, like you said, you can say whatever you want. It's still going to be there. It's not like they're going to get rid of it. It's not like they're trying to reboot. It's not like DC Elseworlds, baby. Like,
Yeah.
It's not that they're trying to reboot the whole damn series. But
there was one thing, because I did recently just watch all 3 of them, and there was one thing that I kind of noticed. I mean, I don't know if I really looked the last time I was watching, but when Anakin goes back to when he goes back to Tatooine to look for his mother, there's a scene where I think I'm not sure exactly who he was talking to, but there's a shadow of him on the wall of one of the buildings. And the shadow looks exactly like a shadow of Vader.
I did not know that.
And I know, like, I've seen a picture of, the younger Anakin with the picture, with the shadow on a wall that looked like Vader, but I don't. Episode 1, I never really saw that occur. So
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
when I saw it, I was like, "Huh, that's kind of really cool," because it's actually in the movie, and I saw it, and I was kind of like, "Huh, that's really neat how they did the shadow, and it, the head looks like the helmet, and the body just kind of looks like
You're saying this was in episode 1?
episode 2
Episode
when he goes back to Tatooine."
Oh, okay. Yeah, all with the same tribe and everything. Okay.
Yeah. And then I think at the end of episode 2, at the end of the credits, all the way at the very, very end, I think I was doing something on my phone. And the very, very end of the credits, all of a sudden I heard, and I was like, wait, since when did they put the Darth Vader breathing at the end of the credits? I had no idea.
I didn't know that either.
I had no idea.
Okay. So
I mean, normally I just stop the movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
right.
I just kind of stop the movie and I go to the next one. But like, for whatever reason, I was like looking at stuff on my phone, and then I just heard the Darth Vader breathing, and I was like, huh. I never knew that was even there.
Clearly, I need to watch it.
Fun facts.
Fun little facts. But I think we nailed this on the head quite a bit.
I think we pretty much defined everything.
So, guys and gals, and whatever you like to be called, okay, we appreciate everything you guys do, and we appreciate all the love and support. Jeff's Corner is definitely getting bigger now. Just kidding. It's actually still the one person. We're trying to get you guys to start, sending us stuff, but
It could be bigger.
Could be bigger, but we're just going to call it Jeff's Corner for now. But anyways, guys, we appreciate it. Stay tuned until next week when we talk about the actual trilogy. Of what we all like to say is really the true trilogy. And yeah, until next time,
Stay geeky.